American Football Stories is brought to you by Coach Paint. Coach Paint is a great tool that allows us to add graphics to player highlight clips similar to the graphics you see on TV. Coach Paint offers the ability to clearly tellustrate video while increasing retention of information in a shorter amount of time. Up your game with Coach Paint today.
What time is it? Game time! It's gonna be special. They gonna talk about this forever.
Welcome to American Football Stories.
Puts his head down, crashes and spins, and dives. Touchdown!
Bringing together the many perspectives that make up college football in the NFL.
Football is one of the greatest sports ever invented.
From players and coaches.
Believe, baby, believe, baby.
Hey, we playing to win right here, fellas.
To the front office and scouts.
The public is finally beginning to catch up, but they don't even know half the truth.
Us against the world, let's get it.
Your hosts, Robert Parker and Nick Knudsen, bring you American Football Stories.
Welcome to the American Football Stories podcast, brought to you by Coach Paint. My name is Nick Knudsen, joined as always by my co-host Robert Parker. Today is June 6, 2021, and we are focused on the Pac-12 season highlights, season schedule highlights, I should say, Rob. But we're going to go through, I think this is top to bottom the most interesting conference in America. And the Pac-12, they don't get a lot of love on the national level these days because they haven't made the playoff in a few years. And we actually saw one of the head coaches from the Pac-12. We might have to do an entire other episode on this, but real quick, David Shaw had quite an outburst against the league this week in terms of the TV deals, talking about how horrible it is that they got to play some of these early starts, especially on the road against teams that don't have the same issues with their body clock. I'll give you an example. Stanford's opening their season in Texas against Kansas State in Arlington at Jerry World, and they're playing at noon. So for Kansas State, that's the same time on their body clock every day. But for Stanford, those guys it's almost it's basically 10 a.m. for his guys. And Stanford's had issues traveling east in the past open seasons when they start early, Rob. So Shaw might be onto something with that. He's basically sick of the fact that they have to bend over backwards for TV deals, and it's not even like it's paying off. They make the least money of all the Power 5 conferences on their TV deals right now.
Yeah, you're definitely right, Nick. I think David Shaw definitely has a point. But, Larry Scott is out as the Pac-12 commissioner, and they brought in, the MGM executive. So I think those TV deals is going to, tighten up pretty soon. And actually, it's been talk about, having Pac-12 expansion. So I think that's something that can bolster these TV deals and, fits the Stanfords and the Cals in the right TV slots compared to their body clock that David Shaw mentioned.
The one thing that I always, when Larry Scott took over, I believe they moved the Pac-12. The media days were in New York, and they did the whole, taking over ESPN for a day where they do the car wash type thing, which every conference started doing that too. But he made a big deal about where the office was located in San Francisco. And there were a lot of changes, during that time where Colorado and Utah come into the conference. They had the Pac-12 championship game. So there were a lot of ideas about where to take the conference. The biggest swing and miss, though, was the TV network, which is still not a great thing. I mean, it's still tough to find if you're looking for the Pac-12 network for some of these games. But I think the Pac-12 for the last decade has chased relevance in terms of they've chased it. Ironically, they've become less relevant, but they've chased relevance on a national level. And I don't think that should be their brand. I think their brand, they're good. If you play good football, you will be relevant on a national level. USC was very relevant when they had Matt Leinart and Reggie Bush. Oregon was super relevant with Chip Kelly, and they're becoming relevant again. I think they're entering the national consciousness again because they're playing good football. So if they focus on playing good football, I think that'll do the job and get them there, Rob. I don't think they should chase a bunch of people. Look, a bunch of SEC fans, they're not going to care that much about UCLA football, just like UCLA fans aren't going to care that much about what Mississippi State's doing on a given week.
Yeah, I think that's completely right, Nick. And honestly, you've seen what the Pac-12 from a basketball standpoint did in this past tournament to kind of, garner some attention for that conference on the basketball level. And I think you can fairly well see that playing out with the football for this year. I mean, last year was a COVID shortened season. The Pac-12, it really hasn't been the Power Five. It's really been the Power Four, because just like you said, the Pac-12 has kind of been irrelevant these last couple years. Oregon and Washington's the only two teams that made the college football playoffs so far since its inception. So therefore, they kind of been irrelevant there. But once again, once you have that play on the field and those players on the field that can be the lightning rods for, a conference, I think that's what's going to garner the national attention.
But it is short-sighted to really actually believe the Pac-12 is irrelevant, though, right? Because what we've seen in the last decade, USC, they haven't recovered from the sanctions fully, the post-Reggie Bush sanctions, which, looking back on it now, we're about to enter an era where none of what happened with Reggie Bush would be an issue with the NCAA, with the name, image, and likeness going on. So some of what USC was guilty of back in the day here, we're entering an entirely different era. It's looked at entirely differently right now. But USC, if they get back up to being that top 10 program that they should be every single year, and Oregon can maintain that status, and then plus 1 to 2 other Pac-12 schools, I mean, hey, the Pac-12 is going to be right back at it really quick. So it definitely is short-sighted to write the Pac-12 off completely. And that being said, Rob, we're in a time of change and transition with the Pac-12. I don't think Oregon is a sure thing this year in terms of winning the Pac-12. USC's definitely not. They got to prove it. Can you name me another contender that's a sure thing this year? Utah? Nope. Who is?
I think this conference is wide open, from day one. I think any team can probably come out the Pac-12 as champions. Of course, we gravitate to Oregon and USC because, of course, they have, the most talent on their rosters. But once again, I think it's an open field this year. You can't say that for the other conferences as much, but I think you can definitely say that for the Pac-12.
So if you're tired of Alabama winning every year, if you're tired of Clemson, if you're tired of Ohio State in the Big Ten, if you're tired of Oklahoma in the Big 12, this is a conference you're not going to get that story. So if you want a wide open conference where there's a lot of great games, a lot of these, and that's for some of these weeks, Rob, I have almost every game listed on this schedule as mattering that week, because this really is the most open Power 5 conference. And I'm stoked to dive in here. Let's go in. We got a week 0 game where Hawaii goes to the Rose Bowl to play UCLA, and year 2 of Chip Kelly, the Bruins. You might not, if you're an LSU fan, you're a little nervous about that opening trip to the Rose Bowl to play UCLA, but you might be a little extra nervous knowing that UCLA essentially gets a week 0 game to prepare. So UCLA coming off, they record-wise not so awesome in 2020, but they had a couple of tough games where they showed progress last year, Rob. This is a roster that people have seen progress in what are we going into? Is it going to be year 4 of Chip Kelly? It's going to be year 4. He came in, 2017 or 2018 was his first year. So year 4 of Chip Kelly, I think people are excited to see UCLA definitely take a step toward a bowl game, but maybe be able to be a team that makes a little noise on the West Coast this year.
Yeah, I think you're right with the sentiments that you shared, Nick, with, UCLA potentially getting a warm-up game before LSU comes into town. So, they have their returning quarterback in Dorian Thompson-Robinson, who's been there for 4 years. So I think you kind of have that experience at the quarterback position. And we saw what LSU, performance, what they did last year against Mississippi State. They're breaking in a couple of new coaches on their staff. I know they have the quarterback situation probably under wraps and handled, but they just lost a lot of talent on that team. So I think this could be a potential upset for UCLA against LSU early in the year.
All right, let's go to the first weekend of college football here. Thursday, September 2nd, Weber State goes to Utah. Southern Utah goes to Arizona State. not going to be a ton of national eyeballs in either one of those games, but first chance to see some of those teams. Again, we didn't get to see Utah's got some new transfers. I know Charlie Brewer from Baylor's in there. They got a lot of transfers in there at Utah, actually. They've been using the transfer portal very effectively. But Jaden Daniels, first look at him for 2021 season here. Northern Colorado on Friday goes to Boulder to play the Buffaloes. And on Saturday, like I mentioned earlier, Stanford, Kansas State, Jerry World opening day. Hey, tough matchup here for Stanford right off the gate. I think K-State's definitely on a national level. I don't know if we ever fully appreciate K-State, how tough they are on a national level, but this could be a slugfest out the gate for the Cardinal.
Yeah, it really could. And I tell you what, I think that's why David Shaw kind of shared those sentiments about, traveling and playing in that time slot, because he know that's a big advantage. So I think Kansas State can come out the gate and actually, get the win against Stanford. But, Stanford just plays that fundamental football. So they're always in the game, but, they kind of lack on the offense side of the ball. So we have to see how that plays out this year.
Oregon opens with Fresno State. No pushover game, but the Ducks will definitely they at least have a week to figure out who they are before they go east to take on the Buckeyes. Rob, we'll dive more into Oregon next week with Ohio State, because I want to get into this Mountain West matchup with the Pac-12. San Jose State goes to USC, and this is a game I have circled twice on my calendar. This Spartans team, you might not know it if you just focus on your little piece of the world in college football. You might not have paid attention to the fact that San Jose State went through the regular season undefeated last year, and with Nick Starkel, I believe Texas A&M and Mississippi State transfer Nick Starkel, old man in college football, coming back for that 6-year of eligibility. San Jose State had a nice little team last year. They're going to be going week 1 into the Coliseum. That being said, I think enough people are talking about this game where USC is not going to be sleeping on it. You got Kadon Slovis back it'll be his 3rd year starting. Clay Helton, absolutely. I mean, if San Jose State goes into the Coliseum and pulls off this upset, what a disaster that's going to be for the Trojans. But I think Clay Helton is going to be well aware of the team that's walking into the Coliseum to face them on week 1.
Yeah, I think he will. And once again, Clay Helton has done a pretty good job of the last couple of years of, cooling down the hot seat talk. And that's pretty much, resulted with the play on the field. They've been bringing in, top talent players on the recruiting trail, and they've been actually performing. But just like you said, Kadon Slovis is back at the helm. He still have, the weapons surrounding him. And then you got Drake Jackson on the defense side of the ball. So it might be a long day for Nick Starkel with Drake Jackson rushing the passer. I think USC comes in this game pumped up, and I think they eventually come out with the win. I don't see the upset, but I think it could be a tough, highly touted matchup.
True freshman Corey Foreman making his debut too, right? 5-star kid out in Cali. They're suiting up for the Trojans. So like you said, highly talented roster at USC still. So we'll see, but that's a game to keep your eye on. Oregon State goes out to Purdue. I just like what Jonathan Smith is doing with the Beavers program. So I think this is an interesting cross-sectional matchup. Jeff Brom and the Boilers, certainly they're going to expect to hold serve at home in this one, but just keep your eye on that. That just could be a fun midday game out there at West Lafayette. But that game that night, it's going to go head-to-head with Clemson and Georgia, so it's definitely going to be overlooked. We talked about it already. LSU going to UCLA. I am not at all convinced that LSU's got this one in the bag. They got a lot to overcome from year 2. There's going to be a ton of pressure on Ed Ogeron to figure it out quickly, obviously. But I think Chip Kelly and the Bruins are going to give them all they got in week 1.
Yeah, I tell you what, I really think, this UCLA Bruins team and Chip Kelly is moving in the right direction. So I think they're going to be a tough out this year. And just like we talked about earlier, this Pac-12 is wide open. I know Oregon and the USC rosters are pretty much set, and they have the most talent on their rosters compared to, the other teams. But I just think it's a wide open conference this year, and don't be surprised if UCLA makes some noise.
Nevada also goes to Cal. The Wolfpack have a couple of solid NFL prospects, including quarterback Carson Strong. So that'll be a game to watch. That's no pushover there for the Bears. BYU losing a lot of talent. They lost their offensive coordinator to Baylor last year. They go to Arizona in Jed Fish's opener for the Wildcats. I think that Jed Fish is an excellent hire, under the radar, excellent hire for Arizona. He's definitely done a good job making some noise around that program on social media this offseason. I saw that video where they brought Gronk in catching a football from the helicopter. I think Fish has a plan with this Wildcats program, but they're in a hole right now. And I don't think you're going to – I don't think you could go too hard on the guy in year one here. This might be like you hear the term year zero in college football where they're so far behind that they might need an extra year. I think this might be a year zero situation for Fish. And if you give this guy time to build, I think he could build something good at Arizona.
I think he can, and it starts by keeping the talent in state. We're going to talk about Ty Thompson, the 5-star quarterback from Oregon, later on in this segment. But once again, that's the Arizona kid that you have to keep in state. And if you keep a 5-star quarterback in state like that, then that just propels your program to move in the right direction. So Jed Fish is a well-traveled coach. He's been around the Bill Belichick's of the world,
NFL too, not just college, right?
The Sean McVay's of the world. So therefore, he's definitely a football mind, and I think this is a great under the radar hire. And I think he can get that Arizona program, back to at least being maybe not relevant on a national stage, but being competitive within the conference. And then once you bring in Gronk back on campus and you're bringing these guys back on campus to kind of, mingle with the up and coming stars and the college kids, I think that just add extra value to that program moving forward.
Washington State. We didn't get to see didn't get to hear a lot from the Cougars last year in year one under Nick Rolovich, but love the Rolovich hire. They're playing Utah State to open the season with new coach Blake Anderson coming over from Arkansas State. Just a game to watch. I want to see Rolovich get off to a good start in that one. Washington State's, I think they're considered down right now, and if they could get off to a fast start, if they could beat the teams that they should beat, that's your path to a bowl game right there. And that's why I think that should be their goal in the second year of Rolovich here. Let's jump to Saturday, September 11th, Rob. Oregon travels east to go play Ohio State in a game that I think is being billed as the opportunity for the Pac-12 to make a statement. Get out of here. Like, I'm not buying that narrative at all. I love the Oregon-Ohio State matchup. I think Ohio State's winning this game by 3 touchdowns. I don't think Oregon has the roster. A year ago, that I think this game would have been a little more fun to watch. It would have been in Autzen. I think this Oregon team was really solid last year, but I think they're replacing a lot of pieces this year. I know they got the potential number 1 pick on the draft on the roster in Kayvon Thibodeau, but you're going to be breaking in a new quarterback. You're going to be breaking in a lot of pieces, I feel like, and I think going into Columbus, Ohio in week 2 is not the place to do it. So I'm going to make this prediction here. I think whether or not Anthony Brown starts the season for Oregon is going to be irrelevant, because I think they're going to walk out of the horseshoe with Ty Thompson, as you mentioned, the 5-star kid, as their starter. I think they're going to plug him in by the second half, and I think Oregon's going to be – they might be overlooked for a few weeks because I don't think it's going to be that close against Ohio State. But I hope that the idea on the national level is not going to be to write off the Pac-12 if Oregon goes into Columbus and gets hammered.
Yeah. I'm definitely right there with you. I think Anthony Brown essentially winds up as a starter, in game 1. But just like you said, Ty Thompson, 5-star player coming out of Arizona, Gatorade Player of the Year. What he can do from an arm talent standpoint, and that's what Oregon essentially moving towards. You see what Justin Herbert did, in his years when he was in Oregon, just throwing the ball downfield, tucking and running and making the plays with his feet. Anthony Brown is a little bit limited throwing the ball downfield. So I think that's why Ty Thompson will ultimately take over that quarterback position. But I think this Oregon team on the defense side of the ball has enough talent to kind of stay in there with Ohio State. But just like you said, they're breaking in too many pieces on the offense side of the ball. That's really probably going to hinder them. But don't be surprised if Kayvon Thibodeau surprisingly is the best player on the field in this particular game, which I think he ultimately can, especially he's having the number one pick consideration. So he's just a beast and he's just a monster, which he could wreck this game, but it's going to take a little bit more than him to kind of ultimately come out with the win.
Yeah. And yes, Ohio State's breaking in a new quarterback as well this year. Yes, Ohio State's breaking in some new offensive linemen, but they do have some pieces like Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, Master Teague's back. So that offense does have some pieces that are really coming back and going to be, and again, Oregon, these are two talented teams, two top 15 teams in America getting together here. But I hope I think it's going to be a stupid narrative that puts way too much weight on this game in terms of the Pac-12's national relevance. And I hope that if Ohio State, which I feel like has a significantly more talented roster right now, if they smash Oregon, I think it's going to be turning into a stupid narrative about the Pac-12 real quick. But maybe the Ducks go in and play a little better than I'm expecting. But I'm also proud of Oregon for sticking with this game because this was supposed to be a home and home. Now, Ohio State and Oregon did agree to a home and home in 2031 and 2032, but still the Ducks are going to be making 2 trips to Columbus in those 3 games. So good for Oregon for sticking to the agreement. Texas A&M goes to Colorado. Carl Durrell was a head scratcher as a hire, but they played well last year. And Mel Tucker left late in the cycle to go to Michigan State for a big pay raise. Didn't expect much out of Colorado, but they ended up playing. They were contending for the Pac-12 South late in the season. Granted, they 4-0. Like they're not playing a full season here. How do you like the Buffs odds with Jimbo and the Aggie machine coming to town?
Yeah, once again, we talked about Texas A&M and Jimbo Fisher, kind of getting over the hump, and it seems like it's the same narrative year in and year out. We know Texas A&M can win these games easily. I think Texas A&M problem is the Alabama train that, pretty much collides with every other team nationally. Mm-hmm. So this should be a game that Texas A&M should win easily. But just to kind of go back to what you said about the Colorado program, I think it's moving in the right direction. We know Colorado has a little bit tradition out there. And it seems like they're coming back to relevance or whatever. But once again, it starts with adding those, top tier recruits on the field and getting that right quarterback in there. So I think Colorado can make some noise in the Pac-12 conference, but on the national stage, I think they're kind of, ramping up and getting there. It's probably going to be, at least 3 to 4 years for them to make that national, appearance on the national stage like the USCs and the Oregons do year in, year out.
And you know who is 3 or 4 years down that top level recruiting trail? Texas A&M. Don't have a lot of hope for the Buffaloes in this game. Cal goes to TCU. Big year for Gary Patterson. I feel like in the Frogs, this will be a big game for them. Going to be a tough one for Cal. Are you expecting another Cheez-It Bowl, Rob? Are we going to see no offense in this game?
I tell you what, we possibly could, because these are the two, top tier defenses, out there nationally. And we know what Jeff Wilcox do, from a defensive scheme standpoint, and they're bringing a lot of players back, some 6-year senior guys, so some 5-year senior guys. So it's going to be a dogfight. And we know what Gary Patterson year in and year out does on the defense. His defenses has not been up to par like we normally see the TCU defense the last couple of years, but we know what they can do on the defense side of the ball. So we might see another Cheez-It Bowl. It wouldn't surprise me, but it should be definitely shape up to be a good game.
Another big Pac-12 Big Ten match. By the way, September 11th, this day for the Pac-12 is absolutely loaded on the schedule here. Washington goes to Ann Arbor to play the Wolverines. Great matchup. Jimmy Lake, probably his biggest test in the first 2 seasons here. Washington can make a statement for the Pac-12 in this game. Michigan needs this one too for Harbaugh. I mean, this is a great game in the non-conference. You got to think that Washington is going to be a game. You think it's at least going to be tough in this one. So it's going to be, I expect it, whoever comes out top between Washington and Michigan, I expect it to be a close one.
Yeah, I mean, just like we talked about, seeing an earlier appearance in the season with Ty Thompson at the quarterback position. Ultimately, we can see the same thing out in Washington with Sam Heward, the nephew of Brock Heward, the Washington big-time quarterback that was playing back in his days. So don't be surprised if we see Sam Heward early in the season.
How about J.J. McCarthy on Michigan? You think we'll see him in this game?
We might, especially with the quarterback play that we saw from Michigan last year. We know Milton is out; he transferred out, so that opens up a lot of the, nuances for that quarterback position moving forward.
Alan Bowman, Texas Tech transfer for the Wolverines. I have a feeling we'll see him a lot in this game. Alan Bowman, watch that one there. San Diego State at Arizona. Just a tough test for Fish and the Wildcats right there. Utah, BYU, the Holy War. That could be a tough one there for the Utes. And Stanford goes to USC. Always one of the better early season matchups in the Pac-12. Let's move on to the next week, though, Rob. On September 18th, Minnesota goes out to Colorado. Another tough matchup in the non-conference for the Buffs. So we could see, hey, these Buffs team, this would be the type of team that you would hope would like dominate their non-conference and then pick up a couple wins in conference to make the bowl game. That's not going to be the case for them this year. They're going to have to play some good ball because they got Minnesota, another tough non-conference game coming in here. Southern Cal goes up to the Palouse to face Washington State. Weird things happen there sometimes. Utah at San Diego State. We see San Diego State pop up over and over again. Stanford at Vanderbilt. This one, unlike the other games, is I believe this is a 7:30 kickoff or an 8 p.m. kickoff here. But year one of the Clark Lee era out in Vandy, Rob. We know Vandy fired Derek Mason. They wanted to become a Stanford of the East. Never quite happened under Mason. But how far off do you think, how many years do you think Clark Lee needs to build this program at Vanderbilt to where they could even remotely compare to what Stanford has built on the West Coast?
I say at least 4 to 5 years, especially playing in the SEC. It's probably going to take a little bit longer for Vanderbilt to kind of, build that program. If they were in another conference, I would say maybe a little bit sooner, but just being in the SEC, it's a gift and a curse. And for Vanderbilt, most of the time it's a curse. So it's definitely going to take a little bit longer for Vanderbilt to build that program to be respectful in the SEC.
Yeah, but maybe a little bit of a trip-up game with Stanford going east, but I think Stanford should take care of business against the Commodores. Arizona State goes to BYU. Okay, Rob, we talked about there not being a clear favorite in the Pac-12. This might be the team I'm throwing my chips behind this year. The Sun Devils, I think of all the teams in 2020, obviously with 2020, it was a weird year, tragic year in a lot of ways, in society, obviously very serious, but just in a non-serious college football world, Arizona State, man, they would have been, I was really looking forward to seeing that roster compete last year. And with the shortened season with the Pac-12, I feel like they were up by two scores late at USC on opening day, and they end up blowing that lead, losing by 1 point late in the game. And then we just never heard from them on the national level again. And they got totally overlooked. They ended up having a big offense with Jaden Daniels, and they were a fun roster still. Like they're going to go up and down the field. But I think they got I think people slept on them completely last year. And I think this year is the year for them to make a run under Herm Edwards. That being said, a road trip to BYU in this spot is dangerous. And if you're going to be that team to step up and take the mantle as one of the top teams in the Pac-12, you better take care of business at BYU. Unlike USC did a couple of years, USC didn't take care of business on this trip. You better take care of business on this one if you're Arizona State. But good test for the Sun Devils here.
Yeah, great test for the Sun Devils right here. But, walking into that stadium, they know they won't have to deal with Zach Wilson, the quarterback got drafted, to the Jets. And I think Jaden Daniels is not only one of the better quarterbacks, in the Pac-12. I think he's probably one of the better quarterbacks on the national level as well. So this is a game that Arizona State should go out there and win just off the strength of, having Jaden Daniels at the quarterback. But it doesn't always work out that way. But, year 4, I think this is year 4 with Herm Edwards. So I think you can see him turning that program around, slowly but surely. So this is a game that Arizona State should win. And actually, they should be very competitive in the Pac-12 this year.
I think the Herm hire, I think everybody needs to apologize to Arizona State because I think everyone, when that hire was made, was just scratch their head, openly laughed. They were openly laughed at in the media. I mean, when they hired, I was like, what the hell? Like, I couldn't understand it. But the staff he put together, it was unbelievable. And they've done a great job out there recruiting too. So I think these guys, and look, these guys want to go to the NFL. It was really a genius ploy for for the athletic director. I forget, I'm blanking on the athletic director's name, but he had a connection with Herm Edwards, and really just the NFL focus is perfect out there. And I think that program's cooking. I hope Herm ends up staying there for another run, because another set of recruits, because I think they've become a fun program to watch under Herm Edwards. Fresno State goes to UCLA to cap off September 18th. September 25th, Cal at Washington. We've seen the Bears upset the Huskies recently in the past. I think this is a program that you got to get the offense going if you're the Bears. They've had very good defense the last several years, but the offense has tailed off. They were the exact opposite under Sonny Dykes. It's been hilarious to let they go top offense, terrible defense, to top defense and not so good on the offensive side of the ball. So let's see if the Bears can figure out that offense a little bit. Going to be a tough road trip to Washington for them, though. UCLA goes to Stanford, Arizona at Oregon. Oregon State goes down to LA to face USC, Washington at Utah, and Colorado at Arizona State on this day. All right, Rob, I'm going to jump to September 2nd. Oregon and Stanford, Pac-12 North rivalry on this one. Stanford has fallen off in terms of being the Andrew Luck type of Stanford, top of the conference, Rose Bowl. They've become real middle of the pack in the Pac-12 the last few years. Everyone loves David Shaw. Nobody questions that he's a good coach. Everybody also understands that Stanford has its limitations in terms of recruiting. But how many years of this are we going to go with this story, Rob? How many years is this going to go on where they're kind of a middling program? I think you should give David Shaw all the time in the world, but maybe some folks in Palo Alto might not agree with that.
Yeah, I think David Shaw gets a little, extra incentive because, his name has been brought up in so many, head coaching hires, not only on the collegiate level, but on the NFL level as well. And he's kind of, stayed the course, and he kind of said, hey, I love Stanford. I want to be here, and I like being the head coach here. So I think that garners him a little, extra time on his stay there, out there in Stanford. But ultimately, I think they do turn it around. Once again, it's all about quarterback play. We talked about the Cal Bears, from a defensive standpoint, and just being top tier on the defense side, but not on the offense side of the ball. Just like we always love to mention, we're Florida Gators guys. So we've seen this in the Will Muschamp era when Muschamp was out there. So I think that holds the same thing for Stanford. Like, Stanford's normally stout on the defense side of the ball, but they're really lacking on that offense side of the ball. And if they can get that quarterback, or they can kind of get that big playmaker on, the offense side of the ball, then I think Stanford gets its turnaround. So it's only one or two players on the offense side of the ball that they need to recruit to kind of, get away from being the middle of the pack team.
Which we saw they had Davis Mills last year, who got drafted, I believe, in the mid rounds by the Texans. But again, last year was kind of a lost season for the Pac-12, even though everyone tried their best, everyone did it, but wasn't that full season of football for the Pac-12 last year. So we didn't get to fully see the effects of Davis Mills on the program. But yeah, Stanford, I think this is an important game for Shaw, the Shaw era at Stanford against Oregon here. And Oregon with Cristobal, obviously, Stanford's always been one of those programs that's a thorn in their side. That's always been a matchup that's kind of like a fire and ice type of matchup. You want to see Oregon continue. If you're an Oregon fan, you want to see the Ducks continue to roll in that game. Washington goes to Oregon State. I think that's a trip-up game right there. Got to be a little careful, especially coming off a hard-fought game against a defensive team like Cal. Arizona State at UCLA. Saturday, October 2nd. This might be preseason. Like, if I had to pick a few games to go to in the Pac-12 this next year, Arizona State going to the Rose Bowl against UCLA might be one of my top 3 or 4 games to go to, Rob. These are 2 programs we're both very excited about. How do you like the Sun Devils' chance to win the South this year? I mean, you're talking about, I guess they got to overcome UCLA, USC, Utah. It's not going to be a cakewalk, obviously, but I think the Sun Devils have a real shot, and this game might be their defining moment in the early part of the season.
Yeah, I think you're right about that, Nick. I think just like we mentioned already, I think this conference is wide open for any team to kind of come out and win it. And Arizona State has the quarterback to do that. They have the quarterback in Jaden Daniels, the highly touted, guy coming out of high school. He had a tremendous freshman year. Just like, last year we talked about, it was a COVID-stricken year, so he really didn't get to see too much of him. And I think he comes back this year with the vengeance. I think he wants to cement that he's one of the top-tier quarterbacks, not only in the conference, but in the nation as well. And that will increase his draft stock moving forward. But if you're a betting guy, I would definitely take the over in this game. Dorian Thompson-Robinson going head-to-head against Jaden Daniels, Chip Kelly offense. I really think this game is probably going to be one of the better games of the year within the Pac-12.
Regardless of if either team lives up to the hype.
Yep.
Just these 2 rosters on the field together, gonna be a lot of offense probably. Let's finish up the October 2nd Saturday. USC goes to Boulder to play the Colorado Buffaloes. Friday, October 8th, get some Pac-12 Friday action. Stanford at Arizona State. I'm sorry. Again, you're coming off a tough game with Oregon. If you're Stanford on that one, that's not exactly the road trip you want to see next on the schedule. Hey, Rob, we talked about the mediocrity the last few years with Stanford. Would you be shocked if they had 3 losses? I mean, coming into this game, even they got Kansas State, they got UCLA, Oregon, and now Arizona State. Whoever made the schedule this year, I could see why David Shaw is having words with people who are making the schedules this year, because it's not a friendly one for Stanford.
Yeah, it's pretty brutal. And they ultimately could have 3 losses coming into this game. But, Stanford is just one of those teams that somehow, some way finds a way to win a game that they shouldn't win. And I think that's just great coaching on David Shaw's part. So I won't give them 3, but I can see a couple losses underneath their belt coming into this one.
And for Arizona State, I mean, not exactly the opponent, the seasoned veteran, David Shaw coming in, not exactly the opponent you want to see on a short week after that UCLA, which probably gonna be a total shootout at night in the Rose Bowl, I'm guessing. So not exactly. So that could be an interesting one on a Friday night. If Arizona State does get off to that hot start, this could be a trap game for the Sun Devils too. Saturday, October 9th, Oregon State at Washington State. 2 programs that are traditionally near the bottom of the Pac-12, but we're seeing a little signs of life here under, like, I want to see what Rolovich is cooking up out there. Jonathan Smith, this could be a high scoring battle right there. That could be a fun one to keep your eye on. UCLA goes to Arizona. Oh, not always an easy trip down to Tucson. Not always an easy trip down there. It feels like Arizona, no matter how bad they are, will pull off one upset a year in that building. At least. So if you're UCLA,
if you're Chip Kelly and UCLA, this is the game that you have to win. These are the must-win games on your schedule.
If you're taking that next step,
that you have to win. Anytime a program is down and they're trying to get back, and those are the games that you have to win as a head coach. So I think UCLA comes out. They're bringing a lot of players back, so I think they come out and get the win. But if not, if Arizona somehow upsets, the apple cart with Chip Kelly on it, I think Chip Kelly could, potentially be out in the next couple years because this is a winnable game that you have to win. So we shall see moving forward. But I like this UCLA roster and how it shaped up for this year. I think Chip Kelly has, kind of grown there out there in Cali and kind of got his system working. And once again, he has an experienced quarterback in Dorian Green-Thompson.
So, Rob, we're about halfway through the UCLA schedule. Let's recap it to this point, okay? And again, this is a program that a lot of people are expecting to take that next step. Part of taking the next step is having a favorable schedule. Hawaii, LSU, Fresno State, at Stanford, versus Arizona State, at Arizona. Tell me the Bruins aren't at least going to have 2 losses in that stretch with a straight face. Minimum of 2, right?
Yeah.
I mean, for them to take that, think, guys, Hawaii, not a pushover program. Mountain West should take care of business there. LSU, that would be considered nationally an upset. I don't care how bad LSU was last year. They still got a ton of talent on that roster. You saw what they did when they went into Gainesville the final week of the season and handled the Gators in a shocking manner. Fresno State, another team climbing back up to in the Mountain West there, not a pushover Mountain West program, should take care of business. Let's go 2-1 at Stanford versus Arizona State. You could easily drop one of those games. So easily you could be coming into this Arizona game with at least 2 losses, maybe even 3. If you drop that Arizona game though, to put you at 3 losses by midseason, that next step is done. So that's what, you're really not exaggerating that, Rob. And we do this show. The whole point of this show, it may seem weird that we're going game by game, week by week like this, but we're kind of trying to project who's got a nice schedule, who's got the bad stretch. So far, we don't like Stanford's schedule. And UCLA, we're all pumped up about the preseason. Everyone's talking about that LSU game. Well, you got to look beyond the LSU game. That's a real tough stretch. And I'll tell you, on the opposite side, if UCLA does step up and win these games, we're going to be looking at a top 10 UCLA team going into Tucson if they're unbeaten at this stretch by this point. So, I mean, it's something to look at. That's why these schedule shows are fun to do, because UCLA, I'm maybe not quite as excited buying that stock as I would if I didn't look at the entire schedule here. Utah goes to USC. Could be a critical one in the Pac-12 South. At the end of the day, we're hyping up Arizona State, we're hyping up UCLA, but these are the 2 programs that are really expected to contend in the Pac-12 South, that have been the steady, rock-solid program year in and year out. Rob, Utah gets overlooked, but maybe I'm going to go ahead and put Utah in the Wisconsin class, and maybe Wisconsin's been doing it about a decade longer than the Utah Utes, but just you don't want to play them. They're going to be tough as nails, no matter what their record is. Every single year, they just have that identity about them, and it feels like they've had roster turnover the last few years. Doesn't matter. Kyle Whittingham is an incredible coach. They just keep putting good teams on the field, and almost it's the anti-USC where they make the most of their talent out of Utah. So, Utah going into the Coliseum, by no means guarantee win for the Utes, but how big is this game for the Pac-12 South right here? Utah at USC on October 9th.
Yeah, I think it's very big. And just like you said, Utah is just one of those teams. They just roll out a solid program year in, year out. And I think Kyle Whittingham has, been one of the, best coaches, in the last, 5 to 6 years. On the national scale. Yep. I know you reference Wisconsin as a team that Utah kind of resembles, but I represents another Big Ten team that I think Utah kind of resemble along the way. And for me, that's Michigan State. Get the most out of the least talent that you have. They're not, going and getting those 5-star recruits, those 4-star recruits. They're just getting those, those recruits that probably couldn't go to the top tier schools, or maybe they're definitely using the transfer portal. I know they like to recruit out of Florida a lot, the state of Florida, but who doesn't? If you're a program, who doesn't like to recruit out of the state of Florida? So they kind of get some Florida kids along the way out there in Utah as well. So with that being said, this is a game that can kind of shape up the Pac-12. On the national scale, depending on who is the winner out of this game.
Hey, we're about halfway through the Pac-12 season. Is this unbelievable game after unbelievable game here?
Wide open.
Off the Pac-12. It's just idiotic to me. There's so many good games. we're going to be dialed into the Pac-12 this year. These are awesome games week in and week out. Friday, October 15th, Cal goes to Oregon. This definitely has been a matchup that I think the Bears beat the Ducks last year. They finally got over the hump and beat the Ducks. It was one of the upsets of 2020. But again, got to get the offense going. I think we're going to be full Ty Thompson mode by this point in the season for the Ducks, Rob.
Yep, I'm definitely there with you. Once again, I mean, I think Ty Thompson is one of those talents that you only have on campus for 3 years. So if you only have him on campus for 3 years, he's gonna, enter the draft early. You might well roll him out and see what you have. I mean, maybe a little bit too early for that Ohio State game early in the year that we talked about, but at this juncture in the season, he should be, up to par and up to speed. So I think we're going to see a lot of Ty Thompson later on in the year.
And again, we're going to act like it's the world that's ending with this Ohio State game, but you have Fresno State week 1 at Ohio State versus Stony Brook versus Arizona at Stanford, and then this Cal game here. Very good opportunity to be 5-1 if you're Oregon, no matter who the quarterback is. So I think the Ducks are going to be just fine. I don't care if Ohio State beats them by 4 touchdowns. They're going to be just fine. And they might not get that respect because of it, but they're going to have a chance. No matter what happens in Columbus, Ohio, Oregon will have a chance to reset and make a playoff run. So if you're a Ducks fan, don't stress too much about that trip. Enjoy the game. Let's hope that your roster goes out there and competes well. But don't stress too much because you got that opportunity to turn around and make a run. Saturday. Go ahead. Sorry.
To cut you off, Nick, and ultimately maybe they could see Ohio State again in the college football playoffs in a rematch. If they hold serve, they go down and they lose to Ohio State and Columbus, but they win out and they win the Pac-12. I mean, that ultimately puts them in the playoff consideration, and maybe they can get the best of Ohio State if the matchup presents itself in the college football playoff.
One loss on the road as a conference champion to Ohio State is not going to eliminate you from playoff consideration. So that's I can't stress enough. I don't care how ugly it is. So we're going to make the world out of it in week 2. It's going to be a big deal. There's going to be a referendum on the Pac-12. It's all garbage. Don't listen to it. And you saw that September 11th weekend, how many other great games there are in the non-conference for the Pac-12 to make a statement. But don't listen to that Oregon-Ohio State narrative. Let that one go. And I think that's going to be something where it's not going to be a referendum on the Ducks season. It's not going to be a referendum on the Pac-12. Let's just see how an inexperienced Oregon team goes out there and plays. Talented but inexperienced. And hey, if the Ducks go out there and pull an upset, then we're going to be talking about a team that's easily in the top 5 at this point in the season anyway. So let's go Saturday, October 16th, Rob, UCLA at Washington. Hey, is that an easy game for Chip Kelly? I'm really hating this UCLA schedule the deeper we get into it. Let's not. So maybe if you're looking at the over-under on the UCLA, I think the under is looking more and more attractive. I don't know where the over-under is at, but I can't imagine it's much more than 7 at this point. Arizona State at Utah. This game right here, we talked about Utah, USC defining. I mean, so this might be the 2-week stretch that defines the Pac-12 South. Saturday, October 9th, the Utes go to the Coliseum, and then they get Arizona State to come into Utah on October 16th. And I said that Arizona State UCLA game would be one of the top 3 games that I would go to in the Pac-12. Looks like I'm signing up for Arizona State this year because this is another one. Arizona State going into Utah. If the Sun Devils, if Jaden Daniels can survive this trip, I mean, again, you want to talk about a Pac-12 playoff contender right here? If Arizona State can take care of business at Utah in this game, we might be witnessing the birth. This might be the day the Sun Devils are crowned playoff contenders.
Yeah, I tell you what, that's not far-fetched at all. And the reason for me kind of even giving that consideration is just because of Jaden Daniels. I think he's a really talented quarterback that can project well on the next level. But, I just want to see what the pieces around him do early in the year to kind of even give that thought of saying, hey, they're a legitimate, playoff contender. But with him being on the roster, Herm Edwards at the coaching helm, this team making strides year in and year out. They're right there. They're right there. They have to break through, but these are the games that you need to win if you want to break through and reign supreme in the Pac-12. So I'm right there with you, Nick.
Washington goes to Arizona on Friday, October 22nd. Like these Friday night games in the Pac-12, Friday night kickoffs, I always like those. Saturday, October 23rd, Colorado at Cal. Again, let's see what kind of steps Darrell's taking in year 2. That could be a nice matchup to take advantage of if you're Colorado, if you're taking that next step. Oregon at UCLA. Chip Kelly, you gotta love when those two get together. Hey, is that another easy game for UCLA, Rob? No. No, it's not. UCLA. I'm selling all of my UCLA stock after this podcast, Rob. I really am. I was excited about UCLA. This schedule is just awful for them, though. Utah at Oregon State could be a trip-up game there. Jonathan Smith, let's get an upset in that one. Like anybody coming to Corvallis, got to worry a little bit now with that Oregon State team. We saw Oregon fall up there last year. USC goes to Notre Dame on Saturday, October 23rd as well. The Trojans they've really fallen behind the Irish in terms of program status. Is this the year they reclaim that back from Notre Dame? I think it's a good shot that USC goes out and takes down Notre Dame this year, Rob.
I think they could, but for me, it's a coin flip game. I know Jack Cohn is coming over to play quarterback at Notre Dame. But, Notre Dame, this roster, has been impressive year in and year out, especially on the offense side of the ball, especially in the trenches on the offense and the defense side of the ball. They've been bringing those skill players in year and out. So I think this could be a coin flip game, but I give the edge to USC just because of the continuity and Kadon Slavas at the quarterback. Versus, Notre Dame breaking in a new quarterback. So I give the edge to USC earlier in this game. But once again, this could be a game that can, have a big implications on the college football playoff landscape.
Saturday, October 30th, Washington goes to Stanford. Again, chance for Stanford to step up and hold serve at home there. Arizona at USC, UCLA at Utah. Is a trip to Utah an easy game for UCLA? There's a theme. There's a theme to this podcast. Who made UCLA schedule? I mean, is UCLA at this point? Are you convinced UCLA is going to a bowl, Rob?
I mean, they have the talent to where they could go to a bowl game, but just like you're harping on, Nick, with the schedule and how everything is shaping up, it might not be a bowl game for UCLA in 2021, but. That's why Chip Kelly gets paid the money he gets paid. That's why the UCLA has the big brand name, because they have to win these games. I know it's going to be difficult. I know it's going to be tough. But if you want to put UCLA program back on a national stage, these are the games that you have to win. So as tough and difficult as their roster and their schedule may seem, they have to win these games.
If Chip Kelly wins 6 games, the man deserves a large extension. And UCLA should be under consideration for a New Year's 6 bowl bid. That's what I'm going to say about that. It's a tough schedule. Friday, November 5th, Utah at Stanford, 2 programs. I mean, these are your 2 gritty, slug it out programs. This could be an ugly Friday night game, but ugly in the best sense, like in terms of just solid defensive football with good running games. Saturday, November 6th, Oregon goes up to Washington in what it might be the most underrated rivalry in the country, Rob. That could be a real good one up in Seattle this year. That should be a dogfight there with Jimmy Lake getting a host. These teams did not get together last year. This is one of the rivalries we missed out on in 2020. Washington had a COVID situation at the end of the season that propelled a 2-loss Oregon team into the Pac-12 championship game. Rob, year 2 of Jimmy Lake. Cristobal's got all the momentum right now with Oregon. Oregon's really cooking. If Lake can make a statement here, regardless of how Washington really performs at Michigan or leading up to this point, I think this is the key game of year 2 of the Jimmy Lake era, Saturday, November 6th in Seattle.
Yeah, big time game with a big time team coming in Oregon. So if you want to kind of get the program moving back how it was in those playoff days, this is the games that you have to win. So we always talk on this podcast about meaningful games, and these are one of the meaningful games of the Pac-12 slate. So if Washington kind of want to get back in national relevance, this is a game that you kind of have to win and at home. So you're not going on the road. You have them at home. So, you have your home crowd, COVID regulations and everything should be, kind of deceased by this time. So full fans in the stadium. So the crowd should be rocking, and that should help you with the home field advantage.
The other game that day, another massive game. That's a massive game in the Pac-12 North, the Pac-12 South. USC goes to Tempe, Arizona, to face the Arizona State Sun Devils. If Arizona State wins this game, this could be the official. This could almost be the clincher in the Pac-12 South right here if they take care of business here, and vice versa for USC. If USC is taking care of business up to this point, but I think the point is the Pac-12 South will not be decided until USC and Arizona State step on the field until on November 6th. So I think these two, that could be a massive, massive game out in the Pac-12. I mean, both of these games, by the way, Rob, in terms of national relevance, college game day worthy for me. So depending on how these teams play, these four teams play leading up to it, I mean, very good chance college game day could be out west on the week of November 6th. November 13th, USC goes to Cal. The Bears finally they broke through here, beat USC in the last couple of years to break a long losing streak last few years here. But still, USC dominated rivalry there. Another tough matchup for our Sun Devils, Rob. I'm calling them our Sun Devils because I think we're really liking this team this year. But this might be you battle your hearts out the last few weeks here. You take care of business at Utah in the middle of October here. You get USC coming to town at the beginning of November, and then you got to turn around and follow that up with a trip to Seattle to face the Huskies. Now, thankfully, the Huskies are going to be coming off a tough game against the Ducks in this one, but Arizona State going north to some cold weather. If Arizona State passes all those hurdles and gets to the point where maybe they're even unbeaten at this point, this is very much a game that might knock them down a peg. This might be a trap game up in Seattle. I'm worried about our Sun Devils in this game, Rob.
Yeah, it fairly well could be a trap game. And I tell you what, we're talking about the UCLA schedule and how it's shaping up. This Arizona State schedule is pretty daunting as well. So, but once again, I give the edge to the veteran quarterback on the roster. So I think Jaden Daniels comes out in these games and get them done.
Certainly winnable.
I think, they might slip up here and there, but for the most part, I think they get, majority of the wins that we're talking about on their schedule.
All right, Colorado goes to UCLA to finish off November 13th. We saw Durrell and the Buffaloes pull the upset off to open the Pac-12 season against the Bruins last year. This is a game if you're UCLA, you absolutely have to win. Yeah, absolutely. If you're going to take that step, you talked about that with the trip to Arizona previously. This is a game you're ahead of Colorado. You should take care of this one. All right, Friday, November 19th, Arizona at Washington State. This is nothing more than a check-in for both of these programs. How you doing? They're not affecting the Pac-12 race in this game. Like, where are we at the end of year one of Rolovich? Where are we at, or year two, technically, of Rolovich? Where are we at the end of year one of Jed Fish? Good check-in point. Could be a high-scoring affair on Friday, November 19th. Saturday, November 20th, you got some rivalry football cooking here with Cal and Stanford battling for the axe. Rob, right now, we've seen Cal take some steps here under Justin Wilcox the last several years, right? Stanford's kind of takes some steps back to they're pretty even right now, I would say, as programs. Maybe you give the edge to Stanford slightly only because of the experience they've had over the last decade here. But who are you buying stock in the next 5 years, Cal or Stanford?
I'm gonna have to go with Cal. Just like you said, I think Stanford has kind of taken a step back these last couple years, and you kind of want Stanford to be in that USC, Notre Dame pecking order to kind of compete with those teams year in and year out. But I think Justin Wilcox and what he's, developing out there in Cal, I think he's been, moving the program forward. So right now, if I have to buy stock, I definitely buy stock in Cal.
Yeah, I'm with you. I like what Wilcox is building out in Berkeley right now, and I think Shaw has had a hell of a run. And I'm not ready to write him off at Stanford just yet, but it just feels like they need a jolt in that program, and they need a change. And I don't know if the old Harbaugh way is going to be working there for much longer. And you might see Shaw dip out for greener pastures. I mean, if I told you David Shaw was the coach of the Houston Texans in 2 years, would that shock you? I mean, I don't think it. I don't think it would. He'll have an opportunity to get out if he wants in the next couple of years if things don't go right here. But would love to see Stanford bounce back too, because love bullying, that big bullying football that they've played over the years too. Oregon goes to Utah. That's gonna be a tough matchup right there. Pac-12 North meets Pac-12 South. Doesn't do Utah any favors to play that game in terms of winning the South or Oregon. That's a tough trip into the mountains in November there. Arizona State goes up to Corvallis. Again, if Arizona State is the team that we think they are, this shouldn't be a trip-up game. But any trip to Corvallis, you have to be a little careful now. Washington goes into Boulder, and UCLA plays USC. Is that an easy game for UCLA? No? Good. So we're consistent. Battle of LA here, right here, Rob. What are you expecting? So ultimately, we've gone through a lot of their schedules. We got one more game for each of them here, but we've gone through most of the schedules. City of Angels, Rob, what's going to happen this year with UCLA and USC? What are you projecting based on what you've seen so far? It's UCLA. Are we making a bowl game at UCLA?
It's going to be tough.
Coin flip.
It really is. It's a coin flip for UCLA to make a bowl game, especially the way their schedule shapes out. But between USC and UCLA, I think USC is definitely a little bit further along than UCLA. I think they're the big brother. UCLA is the little brother. And USC roster is just talented year in and year out. You lose Tyler Vaughn and Armand Rouse St. Brown, and you bring back Drake London and Brew McCoy. So I think USC is definitely the big brother. But if Chip Kelly and UCLA Bruins wants to compete and be back on that national stage, this is a game that you have to win. We're gonna run that into the ground on this podcast, Nick. But once again, UCLA, you're the little brother. If you got to beat up on the big brother, if you want to be mentioned with the big brother and be at the same table. So this is a game that Chip Kelly should win. He could win, but I just don't see it this year, especially the way the USC roster shapes up.
Listen, USC, we haven't had a deep conversation about them yet. So let's go into USC here. You open with San Jose State. That should be a win, even though it could be a tough game. Then you get Stanford at home. I think you should take care of that. At Washington State versus Oregon State. At Colorado. Rob, there should be almost no way that USC shouldn't be 5-0, right? Okay, so I'm not crazy on that. Then you got Utah at home. Even though it's Utah, you get them at home. That's a winnable game right there. You could be 6-0 heading to Notre Dame. All right. I think they're going to be better than Notre Dame this year. You're looking at 7-0 potentially for USC. Arizona, 8-0. I'm not being crazy here, right? Am I going over the top with this? I don't think so.
Nope.
I don't think so. And then I think you get your biggest test of the season to this point is at Arizona State. And really the last month here, at Arizona State, at Cal versus UCLA versus BYU. That's a tough stretch down the stretch there. But if Clay Helton has more than 2 losses heading into this UCLA game, and it basically, if USC is not winning the Pac-12 South, is Clay Helton out this year?
I think
with that schedule.
I think he will be. I mean, especially when you're avoiding how the schedule shapes up. You're not playing Washington. You're not playing Oregon. And those are two.
That's a great point, right?
Pretty big teams within that conference that you're not playing. So
Whereas
if
we
you
see
have,
Arizona State plays Washington, and we see Utah playing Oregon.
yep,
So your
yep.
two biggest contenders in the Pac-12 South are playing those schools.
So as much as we were talking about, UCLA and Arizona State having, pretty hard schedules, now on the flip side, you look at USC and,
Very
their
favorable.
schedule is pretty favorable in a
Yeah.
sense. So I think you're right in regards to if Clay Helton has, more than 2 to 3 losses coming into the stretch down the line. I think he's definitely going to be back on the hot seat, even though he did kind of, calm down the flames a little bit the last couple seasons.
But I got to tell you, if USC is where they should be as a program with this schedule this year, we should be talking about USC in the playoffs. Southern Cal should be, with this schedule this year, should be a playoff team. I don't care. You got to compete at least once every 5 years for a national title at Southern Cal. And we haven't seen that from them in over a decade. And that's where I think Clay Helton's a good coach. I don't think he's a disaster like everybody. I think he's not that. Pete Carroll's chewing his gum on the sideline like he's at Hollywood. He had the Hollywood vibes. Like he's got great hair. Pete Carroll's the man. He's the coolest guy on the freaking planet, dude. Like Hollywood all the way. Clay Helton's just a football guy that is not really suited for that big style LA. Like, I mean, he would do fine in almost any college town in America, but USC wants that extra pizzazz and style to it. And I don't think he's a great fit for that program, but it has nothing to do with his ability to coach football, in my opinion. Now, what I can criticize Clay Helton for is has he struggled getting the top tier recruits? Those, 5-star guys keep getting, where's Najee Harris from, Rob? Is he from California? I mean, these guys are getting out of state. Where's Oregon's picking half their roster from his freaking backyard? So there's plenty to complain about with Clay Helton. I'm not trying to let the guy completely off the hook here. But in terms of coaching football, I thought that he's made some good moves. I like that he brought in Graham Harrell, a couple years ago, and I feel like that's been a move that hasn't fully connected yet. I think that the offense has shown signs of life, and what USC's really had the last couple of years that we don't want to talk about is just horrible injury luck too. They've had untimely injuries, and if they could stay healthy, Kadon Slovis can put a season together under Graham Harrell like Harrell's capable of producing with quarterbacks. Why not USC for the playoffs this year?
I think that's a fair argument. That's a fair assessment on this USC program. We know they're talented on both sides of the ball. Yeah, they lost a couple pieces in the draft, but once again, that roster has been shaping out pretty good. So I think, USC, as much as is a wide open conference that we're talking about within the Pac-12, I think it's USC, then Oregon, and everyone else kind of falls into suit. So I think USC should dominate this conference this year and definitely should come out with college football playoff aspirations.
Yeah, and if you can't be a serious contender for not only the Pac-12 but a playoff spot this year, unfortunately, that's where the standard is for Clay Helton. And I don't think 8-4 is going to cut it. I don't think anything below serious playoff contention and Pac-12 contention. I think we've seen enough on that. So and also beat Notre Dame. You got to beat Notre Dame this year too. So a lot of pressure. USC is going to be a program to definitely keep your eye on this year. A lot of pressure on the Trojans to really. I think they're better suited to make a playoff run in 2021 than they've been in a long time. So, Rob, let's go on to Friday, November 26th, the Apple Cup. Jimmy Lake doesn't have the Mike Leach playbook anymore, so Washington State, hopefully they can get over the Jimmy Lake, the curse of Jimmy Lake, let's call it. Colorado goes to Utah. I know it's not I watched this game last year when Utah went into Boulder and they played in the snow. And I know that this is not like there's no real super historic connections between Colorado and Utah. I know but geographically, the two mountain teams, the two new guys to the Pac-12, I like this new rivalry. I like it. I think it's got potential to grow into something good here. And I like that these two teams get together and there's a chance there's going to be snow in the mountains. I like this rivalry in the Pac-12 here. Saturday, November 27th, Notre Dame goes to Stanford. They always every other year they end the season at Stanford. So that's nothing new. Cal at UCLA. Is that an easy game for UCLA? Nope. Nope. Oregon State at Oregon. I gotta think this is going to be a revenge game for the Ducks in a big way. Arizona goes to Arizona State. We saw Arizona State just lay it on the Wildcats last year with 73 points,
which ultimately led to Kevin Sumlin getting out of there. So
being enough of Kevin Sumlin there. And BYU going to USC. We saw the Cougs beat the Trojans a couple years ago. Hey, USC again. I think this is going to be a team gearing up for potential Pac-12 championship game. I don't think they're going to let off the hook here, but I gotta say, after looking at the schedule, I think Utah and Arizona State have it tougher schedule-wise than USC. So you got to lay your chips, I think, with USC overall. We did a lot of talk about Arizona State, but especially the last month of the season, USC, Washington, a road trip to Corvallis is not super easy. That's not an easy way to end the season there for the Sun Devils. And not to mention the midseason trip you got to Utah, you got Stanford coming in. Arizona State's got they're going to get off to a nice start, but it's going to be tough for them to down the stretch. So whereas I feel like USC's got a very favorable schedule, so I'm liking the Trojans out of the South, Rob, and then out of the North. I don't think we're going to be in for a big surprise out of the North. I think it's going to be the Ducks or the Huskies, and I think it really depends on who's developing a little further at that point in terms of the quarterback. I'm going to stick with the Ducks, though. I think the Ducks and the Trojans, I think there's a good chance we see a repeat of the 2020 Pac-12 championship game. And I hate to be so boring about it, but I'm just looking at it. I think Washington's got to prove it to me a little bit that they're back under Jimmy Lake. And I'm not seeing, we haven't seen enough of them to know so far. And I think they're going to be a lot different. I think we're going to see Sam Hewitt by the end of the season out there in Washington as well. So, Rob, who are you liking in the Pac-12 North and South based on what you see from the schedules? Very shallow assessment on our part here.
I think it pretty much shapes up with USC and Oregon.
You liking those two?
I know Arizona State we talked highly about, and they can be a dark horse, but
I want to pick them so bad.
Just going up and down the rosters, I think USC and Oregon has two of the better rosters within the conference from top to bottom. Yeah. So I give the nods to those guys until they prove me wrong. But early season favorites for me is USC and Oregon.
Yeah. Yep. I don't think we're breaking any news with the schedule there, but I think the one thing we really learned, the most educational aspect we got out of this year, is sell your UCLA stock this year, guys. And again, I like UCLA. I like the program. I have nothing wrong with them, but what stretch they got there. So, Rob, any final thoughts on the Pac-12 before we head out?
I still think it's wide open. I think, anyone can come out the Pac-12. I think they're still relevant. I don't want to call it, the Power Four and not the Power Five, taking the Pac-12 out of there. I just think, the Pac-12 after dark, you just don't have a lot of the, national people actually staying up late at night watching these games. So I think that's why they kind of fall by the wayside. But it is definitely some good football being played out there in the Pac-12. And I tell you what, we might have, the number one draft pick coming out of that conference in Kayvon Thibodeau, the defensive end from Oregon. So I think it's going to be a lot of people looking at the Pac-12 this year just because of, Kayvon Thibodeau from Oregon.
To your point about being wide open, look at the Pac-12 South. It's a great example. We got USC, Arizona State, Utah. I mean, people are fired up about UCLA too, but I mean, you got those three schools. How many conferences go 3 or 4 schools deep these days in terms of being the actual race between those? Maybe the SEC West, but even the SEC West, it's more often than not Alabama.
Yeah.
It's more often than not Bama. So, I mean, it's it's really the Pac-12 is super interesting. If you're not up for predictable football, I think the Pac-12 is going to be your conference to watch this year. So I know we'll be watching a lot of it. We're fired up to watch some Pac-12 football. We'll try to get some Pac-12 interviews over the summer too, to dive deeper into the conference, and we'll do deeper look at the conference. This was just a shallow schedule assessment in June. So we will do some deeper dives as the offseason progresses. But for Robert Parker, I'm Nick Knudsen. We're going to send it out. This has been another episode of American Football Stories. We're going to send it out with a word from our sponsor, CoachMate.
American Football Stories is brought to you by CoachPaint. CoachPaint is a great tool that allows us to add graphics to player highlight clips similar to the graphics you see on TV. CoachPaint offers the ability to clearly tell a straight video while increasing retention of information in a shorter amount of time. Up your game with CoachPaint today.
Thank you for listening to American Football Stories podcast. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, American Football Stories. We are working to grow our network on YouTube and we'd love to have you subscribe. You can find us also on Apple Podcasts, on Twitter, at American FB Story, and on our website, AmericanFootballStories.com. I am Robert Parker. My co-host is Nick Knudsen. This has been another episode of American Football Stories.